folks. Welcome to Common Censored. It's good to be back. It's good to have you back, kinda. I mean, if you count you listening as having you back. I mean, I do. Welcome, everybody. This is Common Censored. I'm Lee Camp, joined by Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello.
This is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other shit.
And we were on break last week, but we're back and better than ever. I always say that when we're back. I don't know if it's true, but
No, and it puts a lot of pressure on me.
we're back and probably almost as good as last time. How's that?
I accept that.
Do you accept that level of pressure?
What is the DC Metro slogan? Back to good.
Oh, see, that's weird that you mentioned that, though, because I actually referenced that in my last moment of clarity. So for anybody watching both of these, you're like, wow, they need to get new references. But
Look, no, we don't, because that's a brilliant fucking reference. It's applicable to many things.
For those only listening to this and haven't heard the last moment of clarity, yes, the DC Metro's motto was, or maybe still is, back to good. Really, really shooting for the stars. So we got a bunch of stories here for you. Many of you know I've been on break, so I wasn't hosting the last Redacted tonight, but as you're seeing with this episode, there's still plenty of content we're pumping out. Isn't there a new Silver Threads coming out soon too?
There is. It's coming out Tuesday, August 17th, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and whatever other time zone you're in, you'll have to figure that out yourself.
So Silver Threads is Eleanor's podcast with Carla Bergman.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's dive into the stories, and then I'll do some housekeeping shit later.
Okay. Which just gives me an image of you wearing a French-made costume, which is not entirely unenjoyable.
Oh, and for those of you wondering, we are going to get into Afghanistan. I did cover it on the latest government secrets, but we're going to get into different aspects of it. We're going to get deeper into the whole women thing that the mainstream media are harping on. So you'll get plenty of new stuff on this episode, even if you heard government secrets.
Yes. So stay with us. This first story is really kind of an update. You folks may recall that the last episode we mentioned Jessica Reznicek, the water protector who is looking at a long prison sentence for, demanding a livable future.
Like, what is it, 10 years or something?
8 years. And last Wednesday, August 11th, Jessica self-surrendered for this ridiculous and absurd sentence. And she reported to the Waseca Federal Correction Facility to begin serving that 8-year prison sentence for the actions that she took to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. And there's a page on Facebook called Free Jessica. And that's Free Jess Rez, so Jess, Jessres.
R-E-Z.
Sorry, R-E-Z. Words, letters, things. And before she self-surrendered, she said, quote, "Today I feel sad to be saying my final goodbyes to loved ones. I am strengthened, however, knowing that I'm still standing with integrity during this very important moment in history, as there is truly no other place to be standing at a time like this."
And these people, whether it's her or Julian Assange or so many others who have stood up in activist ways, and most of them don't serve as long sentences as Jessica may, but they'll be viewed as the rational ones in historically. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that as pathetic and weird as our human history may, whatever crazy turns it takes, there's no doubt in my mind that not long from now, the vast majority will look back and go, "Oh, those were the rational people. The ones going to jail trying to block pipelines."
Yeah. The ones going to jail in order to demand, like I said, a livable future where we can actually drink water and eat food grown in the earth and breathe air. So yeah, like I mentioned, there's a Free Jessica page. They're asking folks to get involved because I think sometimes people, and the reason that I wanted to bring this up is because I think sometimes people feel that, okay, once the person is in jail, then we just have to accept it and move on. And this and another story that I'll share with you later is really evidence that the fight continues, perhaps even ramps up once our comrades are in jail. So it's important to remember that and to stay engaged past that moment. So again, Free Jessica on Facebook, and you can read more information there.
Do you use the term comrade? Are you a dirty Russian? Is that what's going on here?
Is comrade a Russian word?
So, yeah, let's dig into some of this Afghanistan stuff that's going on. If you want other aspects of it, we went into it on government secrets, the last episode that came out. But this one, we did spend a minute on the women issue, but we didn't spend long on it. So I think we're going to get a lot more information on that, which is kind of what the mainstream media has been putting a lot of their emphasis on is, oh my God, the U.S. military is leaving. What about the women? Taliban treat women horribly. And so there's a lot of interesting points to be made here.
Oh yeah, oodles. Okay, so I'm gonna start with this tsunami of sudden interest in the plight of Afghanistan's women. And that this is coming at a time when, the U.S. troops are leaving, and that, the timing of this cannot be ignored. And yet people, even like progressives, such as Marianne Williamson, is suggesting that the U.S. stay there in order to address the human rights violations that we fucking created. So I posted on Instagram yesterday. This is kind of like asking rapists to be in charge of a sexual assault survivor support group.
Well, and just to clarify what we're saying, Marianne Williamson, who has long been against these wars and has, really, if you looked at her on the debate stage with the other Democrats, was a much farther left Democrat than most of them up there, and was saying things that many of them are not willing to say. And there's a lot of positives about the things she has said, but then the coverage started about, oh my God, the Taliban are taking over. Clearly, Biden made a terrible decision withdrawing the U.S. military. And Marianne Williamson seems to have spun on a dime and is now
remarkable,
saying our military needs to stay to help the women.
So one of my favorite things that she tweeted was that she said, quote, anti-war, pro-executing it well if you do it, and pro-leaving when you leave with as much humanitarian care and responsibility as possible.
What the fuck is that garbage?
So first of all, pro-executing it well if you do it? Does that mean, like Obama said, we're good at killing folks? Like, how do you execute war well, you fucking psychopath?
Especially from an empire that has done nothing but obliterate other countries. It's not like we have a long history of actual humanitarian help around the world.
We didn't even go into World War II because we gave a shit about human rights. So this, like...
Well, it was being perpetrated by white people. I mean, what do you want us to get involved in that?
So the one that I initially saw, which was just like, she tweeted, quote, tolerance of systemic violence against women can't be justified in the name of anti-imperialism. Helping other human beings isn't a savior complex, and leaving the most powerless and desperate people to fend for themselves in the hour of their agony isn't political sophistication.
This is the hour of their agony. It just showed up just now.
Right.
Things
it hasn't
just
been
got
20
bad.
years of agony or anything.
Things just got bad this minute.
And okay, so there's so much to unpack here. First of all, yeah, like you pointed out, Lee, it'd be great if we gave a flying fuck about people. But you don't go into a country and destroy it because you care about people. That's not what you do.
Well, we did drop Obama's final year. He dropped 26,000 care bombs on Afghanistan.
We call those care packages.
Trump care packages with a lot of gunpowder. Trump dropped in his first year. I think this is the last year. The Pentagon kept giving us numbers. In Trump's first year, he dropped 40,000 care bombs on Afghanistan. So those were the years where, according to Marianne Williamson, were not their hour of need. Those were fine years.
Right. And
90% of deaths from those are innocent civilians. Over 90%.
Which is something that Daniel Hale, who is now also serving a jail sentence, pointed out. that our drone bombs kill 90% innocent civilians, and it's even higher than that. That's the military's own admission. Like
Right.
that's not us saying
That's
that. That's the
military's
military
numbers.
being like, that we did that.
Yep.
Okay, so the other issue is that like we would have to see if let's say hypothetically that the US was going to start intervening in Afghanistan for human rights reasons, like legitimate ones. We would have to entirely restructure the way that the US exists as an entity from the very beginning of its founding, I'm talking. Because guess what? The people who genocided 95% of the indigenous peoples of what is now called the United States sure as shit weren't thinking about human rights. So from the advent of the United States up until today, there has never been a consideration of the human rights of anybody. And spoiler alert, not even American citizens. All you have to do is look the fuck around, okay? The billionaires became like $3 trillion richer over the course of the pandemic, and the working class lost $3 trillion. I wonder why those numbers are so similar. We had enough money to send weapons to Israel, but not to get universal health care for our people. So human rights are not interesting domestically, and they're sure as shit not interesting in terms of foreign policy
To the ruling elite.
So you would have to entirely restructure the United States as a nation. So I'm going to go ahead and say that that's not going to happen. I'm putting my money. I'm not a betting woman, but I'm going to go ahead and put my money on that. And
here's the thing: is I think this is a great example of it coming from sheer ignorance. It's like with Hillary Clinton and other quote unquote liberals like that, she's not liberal, she's right wing, but they call her that. With other liberals like Biden or Hillary Clinton, they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly why they want a military, why they want to drop drone bombs. Everything they spout is just bullshit. With someone like Marianne Williamson, who has no power other than her tweets, she's not in office. I think it is. I think with her, it comes from just an impressive place of ignorance.
Right, and historical, particularly historical ignorance, because, I think it's important to remember that the CIA toppled a socialist democratic republic of Afghanistan several decades ago by funding and arming the groups that would become the Taliban.
Extremist religious groups, just like we did in Syria.
And as Max Blumenthal, who's a journalist who works with the Gray Zone, which you can find over at radndmedia.com, he responded to Marianne Williams's dumb shit tweet by writing, "Before the U.S. ever occupied Afghanistan, the CIA forked over billions to warlords like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who was notorious for throwing acid on female students' faces in order to topple a Soviet-backed government that tried to provide women with free education." Where are the crocodile tears for that?
Literally, there was the socialist government in Afghanistan had as its purpose, like in their goals, was to give equality to women, was education for all. You can go back and look at photos from the 70s, later 70s in Kabul and other places and see women walking in outfits that are very similar to like Paris at the time.
Right.
And all of this was going on, and the U.S., as you're saying, and the CIA funded extremist, revolting religious groups that wanted to murder women or throw acid on them or make sure they were all covered so that no one could ever see them in public. That is what we supported. And that became the Taliban. Mm-hmm. And now we have known for years that the Taliban owned this country and that our little military by little, I mean, not a million troops. Our military presence was not going to stop them from retaking the country once we left. And when you so the Afghan security forces, which we had put in control and said we trained, when you fund a bunch of people to help out the invaders, is it a big surprise that when the invaders leave, those people are not like, yeah, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to risk my life for the corrupt government the invaders put into power in my country.
Well,
so they just put down their weapons. They said, yeah, we're not fighting for this.
Well, and I think it's also, looking at more recent history, the 1979, the Taliban surrendered in December of 2001. You can just Google it. Google Taliban surrendered December 2001. BBC, New York Times, everybody fucking talked about it. Except the United States did not accept the surrender because you know what? 3 months of war is no fun. We wanted to do more war. It wasn't good enough. It could have ended right there. It could have ended after less than 3 fucking months.
They also said that they would allow for the capture and trial of Osama bin Laden as long as it took place in a Muslim country, and that the U.S. had to present evidence at the trial. But at that time, the U.S. didn't have evidence, and B, or enough evidence, and B, they didn't want to allow it in a Muslim country. So the Taliban both surrendered and was giving up Osama bin Laden, and that was not good enough for the U.S. because the real reason the U.S. wanted to go into many of these countries, Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, Syria, was to basically create failed states that would not be a risk to us, would not be a risk to Israel. We could control them, dominate them, put in puppet governments, steal what resources we wanted, and so collapsing Afghanistan was the real goal, not getting Osama bin Laden.
Right. And of course, when that's your goal, human rights can't, by definition, factor into this. I mean, look at, for instance, the opium production. It was basically nil in 2001 when we went into...
It was banned by the Taliban.
When the U.S. went into Afghanistan, and now 90% of opium production comes from Afghanistan. Which is, by the way, the opium production is protected. Like, you literally can see armed guards, like military, protecting opium fields so that they can be harvested and, flooded into the global market. And
at the same time, while the U.S. is obviously benefiting from that because Big Pharma gets their opium and everything from Afghanistan, the Taliban was also benefiting. They get a great deal of money from that because they're taking cuts to not burn down the fields and to protect in their own way, because the U.S. can't obviously protect all the field. Like, the Taliban's also getting paid bribes and taxes to protect these fields, and so the Taliban's getting a ton of money from the 90% of global opium supply that Afghanistan makes. And another huge source of Taliban money was the U.S. paying them to allow their trucks through mountain passes and things like that. So the U.S. has been paying the Taliban for years.
Yeah. And you had a great tweet. Well, hold on. I think I have it here.
Oh, what did I say?
You wrote that as the mainstream media acts blown away at how easily the Taliban takes back Afghanistan, none of them seem to want to mention that 2 of the Taliban's biggest income streams for the past 20 years have been payments from the U.S. government and opium, which is protected by the U.S. government.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think, kind of circling back to that human rights issue, the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan for the past 20 years has caused 5.3 million refugees just from Afghanistan. The war on terror is somewhere around 40 million. 40 million people. And women, this is like statistics. I'm not saying this just, for shits and giggles. Women, and of course children, are found to suffer the most from war-caused displacement. And so if you really care about the plight of women, you'd be like, hey, fuck war, and which is basically fuck U.S. interventionism. Because this whole fairy tale about the U.S. intervening in any way other than, a sledgehammer is completely unrealistic. God, his name escapes me, but I think he was an Uruguayan writer. I'm so shitty with names, I apologize. But he wrote that anytime the U.S. intervenes, it either turns the country into a graveyard or a madhouse. Yep. I'd say that that's pretty fucking accurate. If you look at scenes from Kabul airport, for instance, which, by the way, on Sunday, this past Sunday, the August 15th, video came out from Kabul airport where U.S. military fired into a crowd of people who were desperately trying to leave the country on the last flights. The U.S. military basically ensured that only U.S. Military, its own people would leave on these last flights. So just in the last 48 hours, you have yet another like prime example that the U.S. doesn't give a flying fuck about the people of Afghanistan. They literally fire into a crowd of them like they're spraying Raid on roaches. In order to ensure that the military and their diplomats and their fucking, assholes that are occupying this country get out of there, and the people of Afghanistan are left to deal with our mess.
And also, if you wanted to show that you cared at all about the quote-unquote people of Afghanistan or the women, the least you could do is take in a lot of refugees.
Right.
And a lot of the people that the U.S. government has worked with over there, which has been tons of people. And the U.S. is not doing that. The U.S. has taken in a few thousand Afghan refugees. After Vietnam, they took in hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese. So it just yet again proves they don't actually give a shit about the people.
Right. And, the plight of Afghan women, this is something that has been used quite frequently since the beginning of this war. Manar Mahawish, who's the editor-in-chief of Mint Press News, tweeted images from Time magazine in 2001, Time magazine in 2010, and then, of course, the most recent cry in 2021 about Afghans women suffering. So there's an image in the 2001 that's called "Lifting the Veil." And it, the quote is how much better will our lives be now? And it's, of course, same idea. Let's drum up support for the U.S. war by showing a picture of a woman's face because that wasn't allowed. And oh my God, it's going to be so much better for her now. Then in 2010, because this was, we've been talking about leaving for a very long time. In 2010, there's another Time magazine cover with a picture of a woman who's had acid thrown on her face. And it says, the headline is, "What happens if we leave Afghanistan?" And it's not a question, it's a statement. So they're basically saying, this is what will happen if we leave Afghanistan, which is hilarious because that's what happened when we went into Afghanistan.
Well, this is what will happen if we stop bombing Afghanistan. Only the bombs can stop this.
If we stop funding the people who throw acid in women's faces, how will the women get acid in their faces? This is their plight.
Ugh.
And there's also, there's so much, if you just start looking at the fucking history, it is just, it's infuriating and it's mind-boggling, but it's so fucking important that we recognize this history because that will stop us from making dumb shit comments like the ones that Marianne Williamson inflicted on the Twitterverse in the recent days. Chinese journalist Shen Shiwei shared an article from February 15th, 1989, that says, quote, "Cut off the arms flow and let Afghans unite. With Soviets gone, U.S. should demand a referendum for self-determination." Oh, that didn't age well. But see, again, you get the context, right? With the Soviets gone. This was about a proxy war to make the Russia, or then the USSR, look bad. And our continued demand that capitalism be the one and only way for people to structure their governments, and not just capitalism, but a capitalism that favors U.S. interests. So this, again, nothing to do with human rights, nothing to do, it's the opposite. It always had to do with imperialism, colonialism, this sort of global hegemony, white supremacy. That was the groundwork for this. And that's not going to change by showing pictures of Afghan women and saying we have to help them.
And Susie Dawson tweeted out the WikiLeaks document. And this is how important WikiLeaks is. But it's CIA internal documents that reveal, it's basically like a training how-to on their plan to weaponize the plight of Afghan women for propaganda purposes. And it basically telling people as a training document Like, you can use the how tough the Afghan women have it under the Taliban as a way to sell, this war, although they don't use the term war, but this war to people in Western countries and in Europe. Like, they will easily relate to the plight of women, and you can get spokespeople who are Afghan women to tell of their experiences. And it's hilarious because it's basically a how to create propaganda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, you stopped talking right as I was drinking water. Gotta time that end of your sentence better.
We're not like the ventriloquist with the dummy routine where he can keep talking while he's drinking the water.
So there's so much to say about this, and we could keep talking about this for hours and days, and of course, Lee talked about this on Government Secrets this week, and I've mentioned it on Instagram and shared posts from folks who are doing real powerful work on this. So there's just a couple of things I wanted to say before we move on. First of all, Richard Medhurst, who's a really great source, and he's also up at radindiemedia.com.
He's a Syrian who does good YouTube videos in English. So.
And he's not the only one who shared this image, but I think it's a powerful image that really gives you some context of the history of U.S. fucked upness. And it's a picture, side by side, of Saigon in 1975, where there's a helicopter on the roof of the embassy getting people out of Saigon. Right. And that Saigon's in Vietnam, by the way.
This was a famous moment where they were evacuating the people, and it was the final Americans, and they had to get them off the roof of the embassy with a helicopter.
And then there's a picture of Kabul in 2021. And I swear it's fucking creepy. It's like the same building.
It's weirdly the same building, same helicopter, and same helicopter pilot. I don't know why that's the job he always gets.
But it's remarkable because it literally looks like the same fucking helicopter. It's the same kind of roof. Everything is exactly the same.
I think the U.S. makes sure their embassies have flat roofs for escape.
Well, no, that's fair. That's fair. No creative domes there.
It might actually be a plan of advance. We may be getting the fuck out of here by helicopter. So
that's how we do. So we're just gonna go ahead and make this roof a helipad.
It's how the Americans do.
But it is a remarkable image because it really is like if there was ever like a poster child image for history repeats itself, that image would be fucking it. And then there's just a final thing that I saw yesterday, and this is an artist called Jesse Purcell, who created this piece, this print at the beginning of the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, and it's called "A Gift from the People of the United States of America," and it's an image of guns and Pop-Tarts. I'll explain that in a second. Being dropped by a military plane. And so the story behind this is Kellogg's, the fucking, huge cereal corporation, had been given a huge amount of money to do so-called emergency food aid, and were shipping off tons of processed food, which was past its sell-by date. Nice. So, first of all, we're sending, people that we've just bombed Pop-Tarts, which I don't know if you know this, but Pop-Tarts are not part of, a complete and healthy diet.
I survived on nothing but Pop-Tarts for 12 years. So.
And also.
To get vegetables every once in a while, I have some ramen.
And also these Pop-Tarts were past their best before date, which I don't even think
which is
Pop-Tarts
crazy.
Have a best before date.
I thought it was 2045.
I know, right?
Was the sell by date on a Pop-Tart.
So the airdropped food was literally marked with a note that says "A gift from the people of the United States of America," and it was received with a fair amount of mistrust because hold on. A huge crate of Pop-Tarts went through a family's roof and crushed a baby in its crib.
Stop.
No, I'm serious.
Stop.
I'm serious.
Stop.
And
Oh
so
my
Jesse
God.
writes,
Isn't it supposed to be on a parachute or some shit?
I
You
guess the
can't just-
parachute
you can't
didn't
just
work.
push a box of Pop-Tarts out of a plane.
So Jesse writes, quote, "This event really exemplifies for me the decades of America's fantastically cynical dealings with the people of Afghanistan."
Well, and as you're saying, even if it hadn't killed a kid, which is fucking awful, it's just designed to be a show. It's help theater. It's a humanitarian aid theater. It's meant so that the U.S. can get those photos and say we dropped aid to Afghanistan or wherever, and it's not actually intended to really help people. If they really wanted to help people, obviously you'd have far better food systems in place.
You'd have
and-
actual food.
and you wouldn't be bombing. So
Right, right. It's funny that you have to send aid once you start bombing someone, but if you didn't start bombing them, you wouldn't have to send them old Pop-Tarts.
But it's just theater. They're not even.
No,
it's
of
not
course,
even
of
intended
course.
to help anybody.
But you know, it reminds me of the Red Cross. Which, by the way, if you want to help people in Haiti, please don't donate to the Red Cross. Donate to organizations like Mutual Aid Disaster Relief, which actually work with people on the ground in Haiti, as opposed to what the Red Cross does, which is pay their CEOs six figures to do nothing. So it reminds me of the Red Cross and, you know, Scott Crow's book, Black Flags and Windmills. I mean, there are so many instances of this, but one example is Scott Crow was down in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina.
If anyone wants to read just like the best analysis of like big NGOs doing nothing while real people who have basically no money are actually helping people, it's that book is.
Yeah, it's that book. And so Scott Crow and, you know, and a lot of folks on the ground had been doing a lot of aid work. And then the Red Cross comes in like months later after
They kept announcing we're bringing all this supplies. They kept putting out flyers and
right,
shit.
Right. And people would have died of starvation if they were just waiting for the Red Cross. And then the Red Cross shows up, wait for it, with plastic utensils.
It was a truck full of plastic utensils and like paper towels. And that was it. And all these people were in line for like food and various like medical needs and stuff like that because they'd gotten all these flyers saying the Red Cross is coming. And so they all get in line and they're handed just loads of plastic utensils.
Yeah. And that, in a nutshell, is the Red Cross. And the Pop-Tarts killing a baby in Afghanistan is American aid in a nutshell. So the idea that the U.S.
I mean, I suppose if we could hone that technology, maybe we could stop dropping bombs and claim we're only dropping aid and just keep killing everybody with it.
Isn't that just what the Democrats do? These aren't bombs. They're love bombs.
Right.
But so again, like instead of crying about and demanding that the U.S. stay in Afghanistan, which literally, if you are demanding that the U.S. stay in Afghanistan, you are demanding the death and torture and oppression of millions of people, and that includes, spoiler alert, women and children. Instead of doing that, if you want to be proactive, you can do things like pressure the U.S. to accept refugees. So right now, there are so many fucking barriers to refugees coming into the United States from places that we've fucking destroyed. But one way to address that is to say that, you know, if you're coming from Afghanistan, you just fucking get to like come in because we destroyed your country, and that's on us. And
yeah, so that is actually, you reminded me, I can go through this list kind of quickly. Mm-hmm. This is David Swanson, who does a lot of great anti-war writing at World Beyond War, and you can find the article at Rad Indie Media, which is our new media project, RADINDIE media.com. And he went through a list because he's basically addressing the same thing that everybody's like, keep the U.S. military there. And he's like, no, that's not the answer. If you want to actually help the people of Afghanistan, here's a list of things that the U.S. government can do for women and men and children of Afghanistan now, regardless of horrible decisions in the past. Number one, until it can reform itself into an entity capable of benevolent action, not a goddamn thing. Don't do anything. Until you're capable of that, don't fucking move. Sit still. Don't say anything. Sit still. Number 2, stop encouraging the Taliban to think that it can become a model U.S. client state in a few years if it's mean and nasty enough by ceasing to arm, meaning we should cease to arm and train and fund brutal dictatorships all over the globe. 3, cease eroding the idea of the rule of law around the world by dropping the opposition to the International Criminal Court. 4, catch up with the world and cease being the leading holdout globally on the most major human rights treaties, including the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Every nation on earth has ratified that except the United States. Most nations on earth sign on to the ICC, the International Criminal Court, except the U.S. And to continue quoting, and the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Every nation on earth has ratified except the United States, Iran, Sudan, and Somalia. Number 5, move 20% of the U.S. military budget into useful things each year for 5 years. How about all of them in the U.S. military budget?
I know, right?
6, move 10% of the rededicated funding into providing no strings attached aid and encouragement to the most law-abiding and honest-to-God small democratic poor nations on the planet. Number 7, take a hard look at the U.S. government itself. Yeah, seriously. Understand the powerful case that the U.S. government could make for bombing itself were it not itself. And take serious steps to remove the bribery from the election system, establish fair public funding, blah, blah, blah. Basically,
all the shit that would
fix U.S. government, yeah. Number 8, free, apologize to, and thank every whistleblower who's told us what the U.S. government is doing. 9, prosecute or free and apologize to every prisoner at Guantanamo. Close the base and get out of Cuba. And 2 more. Number 10, get out of the way of the International Criminal Court's prosecution of Taliban crimes in Afghanistan. See, we're actually stopping that because we don't support the International Criminal Court. So therefore, we're stopping the prosecution of the Taliban, which all of our liberal media, and probably Fox News as well, is acting like, oh my God, the Taliban. Meanwhile, we won't allow them to be prosecuted. Number 11, finally, swiftly become an entity that can credibly comment on horrors being committed by the Taliban by, among other things, caring enough about the horrors coming to all of humanity to invest heavily in ending the destruction of the Earth's climate and ending the existence of nuclear weapons. So there's some things the U.S. government could do if it actually cared about people.
Right. And people crying, like demanding that the U.S. stay in Afghanistan. You are just being a useful idiot, a pawn of the imperialist state. So please, if you're doing that, stop.
They're basically being, people like Marianne Williamson with this are being basically Samantha Power. Samantha Powers. She is kind of the quintessential, and now I think she's the head of USAID maybe. She's the kind of the quintessential we need to bomb to help people person. Mm-hmm. She's made her career, her livelihood, everything, jumping from government to, meaning administration to administration. She used to be with Obama's administration. I went to see her speak when I was in college because I didn't know who she was and didn't realize that she was a maniac. But it's all, her speeches and her writing and everything is all about saving and helping people. And the end analysis, the diagnosis and prescription to help at the end is always bomb and shoot and kill. Mm-hmm. She supported in Libya, and you see how well that turned out. So
opening your slave markets.
Basically, Marianne Williamson is just supporting that kind of garbage.
Yeah. And little side note, since you mentioned the ICC a couple of times, did you know that the U.S. law permits the U.S. military to invade the Netherlands to release any American being held for war crimes by the International Criminal Court? I'm not kidding. That's a thing.
I actually may steal that from you and use it for a moment of clarity soon. So
please do. Because this, I'm not kidding. This is a law. This is an act that was signed. It's known as the American Service Members Protection Act. Also known as the Hague Invasion Act.
I love that one. The Hague Invasion Act.
Was signed into law by George W. Bush in 2002, and it's still on the books today. I'm not kidding. The U.S. could literally invade Holland in order to pull people out of the ICC for, war crimes.
If the ICC were to ever successfully grab like a U.S. general for our endless war crimes and put him in prison, we could then invade them.
So we can commit a war crime in order to avoid being called out for our war crimes.
Yep, that is correct.
I mean, you have to laugh because it's so fucking insane.
Okay, so we're going to move on to a few other topics, but if you want some more on Afghanistan, many of the things we didn't cover on here, check out the latest episode of Government Secrets. That's my other podcast with Graham Elwood. And some quick notes. Let's see, Rad Indie Media, we've mentioned it several times. We hope you'll make it your daily digital digest.
Ooh. Alliteration. I like it.
Your daily digital digest if the other mainstream media has made you puke. So if you're having trouble digesting the other mainstream media, did you get it?
I think I did.
radindiemedia.com. Check it out every day. And please, we're basically relying on word of mouth, so let people know that's where you're getting your news. You can support this show. The show has no ads, you'll notice. It has no funding from any outside sources. It's just us. And the way you can support it is liberapay.com/LeeCamp, liberapay.com/LeeCamp. And yeah, that is really the only way the show is supported. So if you think you got $1 out of this show worth of content, please go there. And Eleanor's latest album, it is at artkillingapathy.com, as well as her award-winning movie. You should check out all of that. If you need to email us or would like to recommend topics or anything, that's commoncensored@protonmail.com. And we have a little solidarity fund where we collect donations on the live streams and we give them out to people who are struggling. So if you're struggling and, $50 or $80 might make a real difference in your life, then please email commoncensored@protonmail.com. We can't promise that we'll have enough to give everyone, but we're doing our best.
And we'll start the live streams back up in September.
Yes, we're on a bit of a break from those, but as you can tell, Common Censored's still going strong.
Indeed. So this little tidbit, I just saw this. I just saw this in passing. The morning scroll, and it's. Here's the thing. I don't think I have the ability to be shocked anymore. But you should never lose your ability to be disgusted and angered. And so this is one of those moments. So. San Francisco. San Francisco might spend $20,000 per trash can. Yes, I said that correctly. Per can, in order to block garbage scavengers.
When I first read this, I thought you meant raccoons because like Toronto or somewhere has gone through crazy efforts to stop raccoons, putting all kinds of weird new handles and things on their garbage. But no, they're not talking about raccoons.
No. And of course, so I'm reading this headline is from the New York Post, which is a total shithole of an establishment. So what this should read is
Remember the puke I talked about earlier? That would be the New York Post.
Yeah. So what this should read is San Francisco might spend $20,000 per trash can in order to block desperate people looking for food.
Right.
That's what that headline should read, not garbage scavengers, you heartless pieces of shit.
Right.
But the story,
but these are designed to stop humans.
Right. Regardless of how you couch it, this is meant to spend tens of thousands of dollars per trash can. So all told, the city currently has about 3,000 garbage cans. So
let's do the maths.
I'm going to let you do that. There are too many zeros in that for me to... I'm going to fuck it up.
I'm not Googling it right now at all. How many?
3,000.
Okay. I should have known that, but it is 6 million. No, 60 million. Too many zeros.
I told you.
$60 million.
So, So these would be new trash cans. They're literally they're calling them high-end trash cans in order to stop people. They're called high-tech.
That's like saying our bombs are high end. It's like the thing
Right.
designed to harm people the most. It's higher end.
And they have pictures of these, and yes, they look very snazzy. I mean, they're just very pretty to look at.
Does it have a human with a cross through it on the side?
But so so there are some people in the city of San Francisco. For instance, the city's supervisor, Matt Haney, told a news station that he was concerned about the high price tag because he saw that 15 of them would be $300,000, and he said that's an extraordinary cost per can. What he's not talking about, what the New York Post is obviously not talking about, is it would be fucking cheaper to feed everyone. You fucking assholes.
Yep.
You want to spend $60 million on trash cans, but you can't imagine spending even a portion of that to feed people. I bet you fucking money it would cost less to buy everyone a fucking steak dinner. All of the people who are hungry in San Francisco.
But you know what's crazy is I'm looking it up now. All of the coverage of it is from mostly right wing publications like the New York Post, Fox News, and they're not going to cover it as in everybody in America should be fed. They're going to cover it as in look at these stupid liberals spending all this money on nothing. Which is hilarious because it's like neither of those viewpoints,
Right.
The viewpoint of San Francisco, we need to stop people from getting in our trash. And the viewpoint of Fox News, look at these crazy liberals spending money on trash cans. Neither of those are fucking sane perspectives.
Right.
The real perspective is, guess what? We live in a country where everyone could be fed and it wouldn't even be a drop of our fucking budget to do it. Everyone could be well fed. Everyone could, we throw out 40% of all our food. It's fucking insane. There's anyone hungry or looking through a trash can in this entire goddamn country. That's the sane take. If you're not a lunatic, that's the sane take.
And I'm also trying to think, how problematic was this? That people were looking through trash. It boggles my mind.
It's problematic if you're a wealthy liberal, if you're, the Mark Zuckerbergs and people like that live in that area, and you have to see poor people going through trash cans. And what it does is it makes you feel bad about the fact that you have $1 billion in the bank. And you don't want to feel bad, and you also don't want to give the guy money because then you'd have to walk up to him. And so instead, let's just spend a lot of money on trash cans that'll make those people go away out of my eyesight, which means they don't exist to me.
You know what? If I were homeless and hungry, which I was at one point.
And you have lived in a car before.
I would plant myself right next to those trash cans and
just urinate them on them every 30 seconds.
Well, and just continuously say, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. I would just sit there and point out that what you're doing now is just starving people, but they don't go away. People don't just magically disappear when you put in an expensive trash can.
Nope.
So yeah, this. I just had to share this with y'all because it just, again, it didn't shock me.
But it speaks to a much larger issue, which is the fact that this system, this capitalist system, only works if you're exploiting a large number of people, kicking a large number of people out onto the street, never really providing for people. The moment you say, hey, everyone can be housed and fed, this system starts to crumble because people will go, well, if I can be housed and fed and not be a wage slave, maybe I won't be a wage slave. And so they need people to be wage slaves. They need people to throw away their lives for jobs they hate in order to keep this system running. It needs to churn up a lot of lives, a lot of time. Granted, luckily, some people are able to find a life that has meaning to them outside of their wage slave job, but it sucks away a large portion of your most productive years. And the only way to keep a system like that running and enriching the tiny number of individuals is to say we will not provide food or adequate housing for people. Mm-hmm. That's the only way that system works.
Yeah.
And it's fucking insane.
Absolutely. It is fucking insane.
Meanwhile, we point to Cuba and we say, that's a horrible socialist government where they have no homelessness and no joblessness.
And their main export is doctors.
Yeah, their main export is doctors. Our main export is,
love
like
bombs.
Like a keychain that farts when you squeeze it.
I wish. That sounds quite benevolent. Our main export is death and destruction.
True. It's carbon emissions, I think.
There you go.
Okay, so this is actually kind of a good news story. It's also over at Rad Indie Media. Not that I support the New York Times, but every once in a while I support something someone does at the New York Times. So New York Times has a lot of tech workers, obviously. They have, one of the most powerful websites in the world in many ways because it's one of the most powerful news websites. And so therefore it's one of the most powerful websites. And so it takes hundreds of tech employees to run something like that. And apparently they walked off the job recently to demand better wages. Over 300 members of the New York Times Tech Guild walked off the job on a half-day work stoppage to protest the New York Times company's aggressive union busting. Oh, the nice little liberal New York Times that hates Donald Trump, right? He's evil and bad, and we're going to stop him. But fuck your union. We will not allow you to fight back against our exploitation of you.
Right.
And so these people, hundreds of them, walked off the job. And interestingly, this did not get covered in the New York Times. I'm not sure
Oh my gosh, really?
why they failed to do an article on this. Seems like
a great story.
Seems like one of the most important, perhaps the biggest news organization in the world, if you talk about an individual newspaper, had a major walkout, and that seems like a big story. You also probably, I'm going to take a wild guess, not that I've been watching every minute of CNN, I'm going to guess that they also, like mainstream media in general, did not cover it, because then they might have to talk about their own work practices.
Yeah. No, it's kind of like how the Democrats never talk about voting rights or, the fact that we have a totally unjust voting system because they fuck with it too.
Right.
They cheat just as much, just in different ways.
Right. Even if you kind of think like, well, the Democrats would benefit so much if they had if we had legit voting in this country. I mean, they've won the popular vote like all of the past elections. When they lose the presidential election, it's because of the electoral vote. And so it's like if they had a real popular vote, if we didn't have so many people purged from the rolls, they would really benefit. But they don't really get into it. I mean, they did have some kind of half-assed voting rights thing they just forced through Congress. But in general, they don't really get into it because they want to keep rigging their primaries. Mm-hmm. So that's very important to them.
Yeah. It's hard to look in the mirror, folks.
According to the News Guild, the New York Times has committed at least 3 unfair labor practices, including barring employees who manage interns from showing pro-union support.
Jesus Christ.
You can't even show pro-union support. Polling workers...
Well, what would that mean? Like you wear like a union T-shirt or something?
Yeah, literally. You wear a union T-shirt, you have a pin on, maybe it's on your desktop or something, like the dancing union image comes up on your computer when you walk away from it. Then they've also polled workers on union support, which is not supposed to be allowed. And in one case, saying in a meeting that workers would get more from management if they stopped their organizing campaign.
Wow.
So here is the nice, liberal, wonderful New York Times that even, I think, both of our parents still act like is the gold standard of news, trashing unions and making sure that they don't have one, which also speaks to, do you think they have unbiased reporting on unions outside of just news outlets? Do you think they're really giving unbiased coverage of union fights in other areas? Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Yeah, if you still read the New York Times, do yourself a favor, find a nice fall day, make yourself a nice fire, and use it as fucking kindling.
And then go to radindiemedia.com.
There you go. So one final thing before we before we sign off here, again, this circles back to the first thing that I mentioned with Jessica Reznicek. There's been a few calls to action regarding Kevin Rashid Johnson. You might not be familiar with that name, but he's been incarcerated for decades. He was arrested in 1990 and as a young adult, and received a lengthy prison sentence because the drug war and because racism. And he has wrestled with solitary confinement. And but in that time, he also taught himself law and began litigating against the prisons. So he's
awesome.
Definitely not a favorite of these assholes. He's also organized with folks on the outside, including IWOC, which is Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee. He's also been a part of the Panther Solidarity Organization, PSO, the New African Black Panther Party prison chapter, and others. And so he has been fucked with a lot by prisons, and he's been transferred recently to the Indiana Department of Corrections. Since he was incarcerated in Virginia, he's moved from Virginia to Oregon to Texas to Florida and Indiana prior to his current captivity in Ohio. And part of the reason they do this is because they don't want you to get connections to people on the inside and start filling their heads with shit like human rights and education. And
they also do it as a punishment to take you away from your support system, so
right.
family members can't make the journey to visit him, things like that.
Yeah. And the latest move, he's also been moved to a place where the Aryan and white supremacist gangs are. So obviously this is a deep threat to his safety. He's also been threatened explicitly by cops and by guards at the prison. One of the recent things that was said to him was, quote, by Sergeant Joshua McAllister, who said, quote, "I'm an old school dirty cop. I've been doing this since I was a teenager. We know how to set it up and make it look justified. We are worse than the Klan. We have a unit called J1 where we execute inmates. We starve them, we hang them," end quote.
Boy, that's fairly honest.
I mean, it's straightforward. You have to give him that. So what folks are doing in terms of support and raising awareness, first of all, just knowing about that case is super important. But also there's support ongoing and a call to action. So, for instance, they're asking folks to call and to call the warden at the Indiana Correctional Facility and the director of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. And this is all information that I will share in the show notes. But there are also a list of demands. So far, he hasn't been able to access simple things like even shoes. So they're keeping basic sanitary and hygiene items from him as well. So basically because he's been organizing on behalf of himself and other prisoners. So that'll be in the show notes. You can also look up his case, Kevin Rashid Johnson. Incarceratedworkers.org, that's IWOC. You can look at their website and find out more information about him. Again, that's incarceratedworkers.org. And he also has a support website called rashidmod.com. And of course, like I said, I'll put that in the show notes.
Cool. So that's the show. Please check out radindymedia.com. If you feel like you got even $1 worth of content out of this episode, it would be great if you could go to liberapay.com/Lee Camp, liberapay.com/Lee Camp, and become a member there. That is the only place that supports this show. The other times we take donations on the super chats on YouTube and things like that, those all go to people who are struggling. So those do not go to support the show. If you are struggling and a few bucks might make a big difference, email commoncensored@protonmail.com. All of Eleanor's work is at artkillingapathy.com. And if you want more on Afghanistan, I just did a full hour on it with Graham Elwood. That podcast is called Government Secrets. It's free on all the podcast networks, and it's also on YouTube.
Do it. And until next time, we might be a little bit later next week with the episode of Common Censored, but we will.
Don't you apologize for nothing.
Did I say sorry? Or did I just announce?
I'm just kidding.
Don't make it sound like I said sorry when I didn't say sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you. So until next time, folks.
Keep
act out.
fighting.
Wait, you can't.
Yeah, simultaneous. That was awesome.
Just pretend that we timed that better, everyone. See you next time.